an underwriter that doesn't have the experience, and if they see something that complex, they might get put off and think that, hey, this is something that it's illegal, and there goes your chances of, qualifying for a mortgage.
We have purchased many properties. You?
28.
And I already have 2. In this video, we'll share with you how you can purchase your properties faster. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode in NOVARISE. And today we have Anthony, co-founder of NOVARISE. And in today's episode, it's actually a follow-up to an interview we have a couple of months ago about your experience purchasing real estate and how you managed to buy a property within 1 year, meaning 1 year after you set your mind to it. So in the comment section, somebody left the question asking about down payment assistance. Why didn't you choose to go that route to purchase your property?
The main reason why I decided to not go for the assistance programs that obviously you can get a much lower down payment for your house was because, one, you most likely going to pay more money on interest for that property that you're looking to acquire. So that means less cash flow. And the second reason, it was time. Like applying for those assistance programs, it usually takes an extra 3 weeks, 1 month, or 2 months. Who knows how long is it going to take? In my case, my property, I had to close it in 1 month. So that means I need to move faster. And applying for assistance programs, it was just going to delay the process even more.
And just to elaborate a little bit on the whole cash flow thing, because we have people from all kinds of background and levels. The cash flow just simply means your income, in this case, your rental income from your investment property, minus whatever expenses. You can include the property management, any utility cost, the mortgage, insurance, property taxes, all of that is included. And Anthony, you were saying that if you were to go down that route, you will have less cash flow. So I would like to elaborate a little bit more as to why. So for those who didn't know, assistance program, there's plenty of them, right? So there are VA loans where you can buy a property with zero money down. There are FHA loan that you can actually put a lower down payment. There are even conventional loans where you can start off with a low down payment. What is a low down payment? It could go as low as 5%, sometimes even as low as 3% down. So what happens when you go through a down payment mortgage, so to speak, right? So typically, lenders would like to see at least a 20% down payment, right? That's why they're called an assistance program, because if you had the 20% down payment, you wouldn't go through those assistance programs. So what happened is that if you choose to take on to those assistance programs, you will be given, let's say, for example, in this case, a 5% down, right? So that means that there's a difference of a 15% before you can reach that 20%. So lenders don't like that. And as a result, what they need you to do, or what they mandate you to do, or make it a requirement, whichever way you want to call it, is that you have to buy a separate insurance to ensure that difference of that 15%. In the event that if you default, then hey, at least they can collect on that 15% because they just don't want to take the risk. So back to your point, it is less cash flow because not only you had all the other expenses that I just listed, in addition to that, now you're adding that additional mortgage insurance to the equation. That's not to say it's a bad thing. It's just something you need to take into consideration and work out the numbers and figure out whether that works out for you. In your case, it did not work out.
Correct, yeah. I have a question for you, and I'm sure most of you probably have the same question. Probably you're not in the same position that I was. For the people who are listening, where can they find these assistance programs? Do they go to the bank? Do they go to a website? Like, how does that work?
You can do both, actually. You can go online and find out about programs, FHA programs, and then usually on the website, there's a section where you can find a lender that actually works with that kind of loan. That's if you want to start off from the assistance website. Now, if you don't want to go through that route and you want to go specifically to a lender, to a bank, you just walk up to a branch and say, hey, do you offer any low down payment assistance program? Or you can just work with a mortgage broker and ask them directly. Or you can even ask your realtor, because they might not give you the financing, but every realtor should have a broker they work with as part of their power team. So that way you can actually span on to your options and see what works out for you. Because it is always a good idea for you to seek out for multiple options. Don't just take the first item you find or the first rate that you find. Just simply go around and ask people.
Thank you for sharing that. Now I'm going to flip the script. I have a question for you. Have you used any assistance programs for all the properties that you have?
I haven't used any down payment assistance program, just simply because of the fact that I don't qualify for any of them. I'm not a veteran. And for the most part, those type of assistance programs are meant to help people buy their home, right? What is the difference between a property, a house, and a home? A property can be something you buy and you put it to work for you, right? Like it's just a house with a roof. A home, that's your home. That's your crib. That's where you go back to. That's where you live. That's where you spend your nights. So those type of programs are meant to build or help you get access to a home, not just a property. And in my case, the properties that I have are only investment based. And unless I plan to live there, there's no way I could qualify for that. Now, I know a lot of people actually take advantage of those programs and are able to buy investment properties. But here's the caveat. They buy investment properties that they can live in. What do I mean by that? So for example, in New York, it's very common to see properties that are multifamily. So you can find a property that is a 2-family home or a 3-family home. And what a lot of people do is that they buy the property, they live in one unit, and then they rent out the other 2. So when you do that, technically that property, it's also your home because you are residing there. And for that reason, you do qualify for programs like this. Why haven't we thought of it? It's just because, well, one, we don't invest in New York. The money or the numbers don't work out for us. And also because of privacy. I'm personally not comfortable buying an investment property and then residing in there, mainly because of the whole conflict of interest thing, meaning that what happens when you share a roof with people, right? You eventually get to know them. If their family grows and they wind up having children, then you get to see the children and you grow more fond of them. But then eventually you're sort of like mixing business with, personal stuff. And yeah, I know it sounds a little hypocritical because we're a couple and we're married and we have a business, but this is completely different, right? Let's say you buy one of those properties and you rent it out. You rent it out for years. You see the whole family grow. And then something happens, right? And they lost their job. They cannot afford to pay the rent. And maybe you let it go for a couple of months. But, month 6 hit, you still haven't been able to collect rent. And you still have a mortgage to pay. And you have been paying that mortgage out of pocket. What do you think is going to happen to that relationship? So I don't want to put myself in a situation in where that line is going to get crossed. Like we want to keep everything as professional as possible and maintain our relationships, call it friendships, call it business working relationships in good standing, because there's no need to just carry it on more load. We already have enough. We already have a business that we're running. We have a portfolio, and now we're brand new parents. So there's a lot on our plate. Yeah. And personally, there's no need for us to take on more work. I'm personally okay with investing out of state and having a team help me manage that.
Yep.
Far away from me, where I don't have to know who's renting per se, and I don't have to know the story, because it doesn't cloud my decision-making process. But every person is different. Some people don't mind doing that. We actually know people in our circle who are actually doing that. They bought a multifamily home. They're flipping it themselves. And they took a low down payment assistance program. And yes, it was a living nightmare. It took them months before they closed. But that's just them. What works for you doesn't necessarily have to work for us. And what works for us doesn't necessarily mean it will work for you. So it's all a matter of knowing what your options are and just choosing what works best for you in this equation.
Thank you so much for sharing, Celia. Now I have another question for you, and that's how can you improve or make the process of buying a house much faster?
Well, first take a look at the requirements, and chances are if you pay attention to those and you gather the documentation, every time you apply for another mortgage, they're more or less going to ask you for the same thing. What do I mean by that? So let's say, for example, a typical list of requirements that a lender asks for is copies of your bank statement. Some banks ask for 6 months, some banks ask for 12 months, depending on the lender. They're going to want to see your pay stubs just to make sure that, hey, you are in fact getting paid and that whatever income that you listed on the application is the same as the one that they're seeing in your pay stub. They're going to ask you for copies of your taxes. Typically, it's the last 3 years. Some lenders are more strict, some are more flexible. And they are going to ask you to list whatever assets you have. Call it a stock brokerage account that you might have or any life insurance. So whatever you list in the application process, for the most part, they're going to want to see evidence of that. And so what I normally do is that every year, I maintain a folder of that. So that way, if an opportunity comes up and I go and work with a lender, I don't have to take forever to pile up that documentation. So all I got to do is just to go into my drive and just drag and drop those copies and just voila, send it over. And here's an additional tip that I want to share with everybody. You do not have to go to the bank and make a line to get copies of your bank statements. Because if you do that, they're going to charge you, I think, at least $10 per statement. And if you need to get 12 months worth of statement,
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. If you don't have the paper copy, because banks, they usually mail those to your house, but let's say you got rid of them, and if you still need access to those paper copies, what you can do is just to sign up online to your bank account, and then you go to the statement section and you download them into your computer. That way you save on paper, it's electronic, you can save it into your computer or onto a drive that you might have, or a cloud, whatever tool you use to save your documents, and then you can just simply send those over to your broker. So that's how I do it every single year.
Here's an extra tip that I think I can add to this section is because we have a bunch of credit cards, have a bunch of banks, and I realized that the easiest interface to just go in there and get those statements is from Chase. So non-sponsored, just Chase has been working awesome for me. So now, in terms of the application, because I know when you're submitting an application to buy a house, first you need to send it to the broker, then the broker communicates with the underwriter. There is an entire process that goes in there, right?
That's right.
What's the most frustrating part of that entire process, and in which section?
The underwriter part. I mean, the gathering the documents, it might feel like it's too much the first time around. But then after you get familiarized with the process, you realize it's a rinse and repeat. But with the underwriter, sometimes it's hard to anticipate what they want, because what happens is the way everything is structured, and the reason why there's an underwriter is they're trying to maintain layers, right, to prevent any conflict of interest. So let's say, for example, the broker, right? So the broker is the front face that you deal with. You talk to them, you develop a relationship, they get to know you, they get to know your family, what you're looking for, and all that stuff. And chances are, if they like you, they might want to do a little bit of extra to help you, but if they dislike you, they might just ruin your chances of getting a mortgage. So the reason why there's an underwriter is because they want another layer to review that documentation in a way that is non-biased, meaning this person doesn't know you, doesn't know your story, doesn't know who you are.
And you cannot call them.
And you cannot call them, yeah. And all they do is just to look at the documents and figure out whether that makes sense or not, right? So we're good until that part, right? The part where it gets frustrated is because, at least with us, our legal structures and our taxes are a little complex to understand for some people, right? Like, unless you have the experience or you're an accountant, it's hard to try to make up what our taxes are. And an underwriter that doesn't have the experience, and if they see something that complex, they might get put off and think that, hey, this is something that it's illegal. And there goes your chances of, qualifying for a mortgage, right? So I've had instances where dealing with the underwriter it's really frustrating because, one, they don't understand what you're trying to say, because you cannot talk to them, so you can't really explain them what they need to understand. So everything has to be in writing. Sometimes it could be an easy explanation over email that you sent over to your broker, and then your broker will forward it to the underwriter. But sometimes they need something even more extensive. They need something more formal, like a letter with a letterhead and a signature at the bottom. So those are the things that sometimes get delayed. And if you happen to work with an underwriter that doesn't have any experience at all, that's even more frustrating, because sometimes they don't even know what to ask, or they ask for the wrong thing. And what it does is that it continues to delay your mortgage. I've had that happen to me during the purchase of the 17 unit, now long sold. But when I was qualifying for that years ago, we had the misfortune of working with an underwriter that did not have the experience and had no idea what he was asking. And he apparently didn't even know how to work with the system, because every time I was providing those documents, he could not find them. And I was literally looking at them, like they're like right here, but that person could not find them, or he just simply didn't care. And so long story short, that entire application process took more than 3 months to close. I had my mortgage rate readjusted. Obviously, it became more expensive because of that person. And in the end, like, it was just my frustration to deal with, because the underwriter is like, whatever. So it's just unfortunate things to deal with. But when you do encounter those situations, just make sure you don't lose the lesson. And over the long term, you will gain enough experience to kind of anticipate the needs of those underwriters. So for example, like if I am packaging my mortgage documents and I send it to the broker, like I start anticipating, well, I think this underwriter is going to want to know why my taxes were done this way in this year, and why was it different the year prior. And so I start drafting documents to answer those questions. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to send them over, but at least I know I have them anticipating their move. More often than not, they do wind up asking for those documents, but I wait for them to ask for it. I don't just send them beforehand, because if one thing I learned is that if you send documents that the banks don't require from you, you will end up confusing them. So never send them any extra, just send them exactly what they ask. And if they do come back and ask you, that's when you provide those extra documentations.
And I just want to add something, because keep in mind, you are responsible to show what you want them to see. That means that you don't have to show everything that you have.
Yes and no, it depends. Like if you're filling an application process, you have to give them what they're asking in that application process. And you have to be very careful with like giving them what they want to see, because there's a fine line between lying and not being transparent and hiding stuff, right?
Yep.
For example, debt, you cannot hide. So if you want to, let's say you're filling up an application for a mortgage and you want to look like you're amazing, you have zero debt. And whenever you fill in the application, you say, oh, I have zero credit card debt. Believe me, the lender's going to know, because the first thing a lender will do is to pull your credit score.
Yep.
And as soon as they pull up your credit profile, they're going to see that you have debt in your credit. So in that case, two scenarios could happen, right? Either the debt is yours and you lie, which will get you disqualified for a mortgage, or that somebody stole your identity and has been racking up credit card debt on your behalf, in which it will also get you denied for a mortgage, because they cannot lend to someone who has a high debt ratio in their profile. So to your point, yes, you show them what you want them to see, in the sense that if you have some assets,
let's say silver, gold, and investment here and there that you probably
or like your brokerage account with stocks, because you think that's going to help your net worth be higher and increase your chances of qualifying for a mortgage, then yeah, you put that in the application. But just bear in mind that everything you put in the application means you're going to have to show proof, not just an explanation, but the proof of it. So the lender can come back and say, hey, I want to see your last 6 months of your brokerage account showing me all of your stocks, right? Or your last 12 months. If you have life insurance, then they're going to want to see the statements of your life insurance and all of that stuff. But if you choose not to put it, then they're not going to ask you any documents. But again, it all depends on your situation. If you have enough cash for the down payment, if you have enough cash for the reserve funds, then you might want to consider, do I really want to disclose this in the application process, yes or no? And if you do, just know that they're going to ask for documentation. But if you don't have enough reserves and you're kind of like in a hit or miss point where you're not sure if you're going to qualify for that rate that you want so much, or maybe they're not going to even approve your mortgage, and you know you have other assets that are going to help you look better in front of the lender, then yes, you definitely want to put those in and list all your brokerage accounts or like any gold or silver that you have on the side so that your net worth sheet looks nice and fat to qualify for that mortgage. So yes, it is more work, but at the end of the day, you're also getting more money, right? And when it comes down to asking people for money, you're just going to have to provide the documents that they require. There's no other way around.
In terms of assets, you were talking about assets. What do you think are the most important assets that you can list in the mortgage application that have a lot of weight?
Lenders like to see things that are liquid. And what is an example of something that is liquid? Your stock brokerage account, because you can grab it and you can just sell your stocks like immediately, and the funds could be in your account within 24 to 48 hours depending on the amount. Real estate is not so liquid in that sense. It is liquid in the sense that yes, you get the cash flow, but cash flow is a minimum amount if you're gonna need to use that money to pay off a larger debt. And so that's why real estate is viewed as illiquid, because in order for you to liquidate that house, to sell that house, it needs a long process. You need to find a realtor, one that you trust, and then there's the process of taking pictures and then listing the property, then showing the property to any potential buyers, and then getting offers and then accepting offers. And then once the offer is accepted, then that person needs to go through the whole bank process of qualifying for a mortgage. So we're talking about a process that takes months. So yes, it is nice to see that you have other properties, but bottom line is whatever asset that is liquid will always gonna win. It will always be the preferred choice by the lenders. That doesn't mean you should not include real estate. You should include everything that you have within your portfolio if you know that's going to help you look better in front of a lender and qualify for a better rate and a higher loan amount.
If you have a car, is that considered something like an asset?
No. For lenders, there's a liability, because you have to pay for the car at the end of the month. And so they actually include that as part of your debt. And it increases your debt to income ratio, meaning it shows that you have more debt. And it doesn't make you look good. Lenders typically prefer a debt to income ratio that is under 36%. I like to keep it under 30% just to play it safe. So those were our tips. We want to know what has worked for you to make the whole mortgage application process more efficient. Let us know down in the comment section and help us help this amazing community to continue growing. We love you very much, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.